You've written about the Breakers, New Zealand Breakers, and the Wellington Phoenix kind of recruitment chat over the last few weeks, and we'll lead into our Flying Kiwis discussion here, just off the back of the Wellington Phoenix, their recruitment. So it'll be a bit of a football centric back end here. But I am interested just to start this off with your thoughts on comparing the Breakers to the Phoenix, just kind of assessing the moves they have made and where they are at right now. Obviously, this is something we've been tracking and discussing for a long time. The ups and downs of both clubs, how they've dealt with the COVID situation, having to be based in Australia, along with the Warriors, who's made the most of that. Like, we discuss these teams quite a lot, just because they're all in the same boat. They're New Zealand teams competing in Australian competitions, easy to compare, easy to contrast. We've been through the dynasty phase of the Breakers. We've been through 3,000 different coaches for the Warriors and the Phoenix. We've been through the cult heroes. We've been through the young hot prospects. It's all there. It's all part of the niche case history. So we don't necessarily need to go into the whole wider context. I'm just curious how you're comparing and thinking about their off seasons, not summer, but their off season recruitment moves, and any trends you're seeing just in how these two clubs, the Wellington Phoenix and the New Zealand Breakers, are going about their roster building business, their mahi, and building squads.
Yeah, building the rosters is a pretty massive part for either of those seasons. I think it's generally, you see, for example, the Breakers haven't been flashed in the last couple of years, and it's been something that's been quite what's the word, like critical in terms of how they end up going. Like, the case in point, there's the old Lamar Patterson thing last season. When your star import is not delivering on a level that you expect a star import to be, then that is kind of that's kind of a decisive thing in your season. And the Phoenix know this because they've been in that boat before. The Phoenix, however, in the last couple of years have been pretty outstanding when it comes to like player recruitment. And that's, I just wrote a big old thing about that, about just how good they have been since Ufuk came around. The situation they find themselves in at the moment is kind of similar. They're both obviously being hampered by the unknowns of trying to run seasons in another country during a pandemic, and various lockdown flare-ups in the last couple months have not helped things there. That's probably slowed down some of the recruitment side of things. Like, they each need at least, the Breakers have one more roster spot, which will be for a big old star import who's hopefully going to come in and run the show. The Phoenix have a couple of import spots left, and about 2 or 3 more local spots as well. So there's a little bit more work for them to do. But in particular, I think you can draw a parallel between the Breakers. The Breakers are still awaiting to sign, hopefully, the dude who can be the next Scotty Hobson or whatever. And the Phoenix are hoping to sign the guy who can replace Ulysses Davies. So that's where they're both at. In terms of similarities, and just the starts of the season sort of leave them in similar places. But I think there's a really interesting parallel to say here about, it's not even a parallel, it's the opposite. Like, the really interesting divergent thread here about the way that each of those two teams have been operating in recent times, because Tele is very much about like, Tele with the Phoenix is very much about like, we need not just the best player, but the right player, like the guy who's going to come in, who's going to fit the system that we want to play, who's going to be the right kind of guy in our dressing room, and someone who can be a benefit on and off the field. And, a very kind of holistic is the word that sprung to mind, but I think that maybe doesn't quite give the right impression. It's more just very whatever the good version of pedantic is, like, it's taking care of all the details and being right about that kind of stuff. And the Breakers are the Breakers, you get the impression, are not quite in the same level of research with these kind of things. They're more like, let's just get the best player, full stop. like the best available player, we will get them. And then if they happen to be in the same position as the guy who's like a couple of our best players already that we already have under roster, well, we're going to figure that out later. We're going to, like, they're very much about the way I've been putting it and writing about them is talent over fit. And I think the Phoenix are very much fit over talent. That's not saying they're signing rubbish players who are nice dudes, but it's just that you can't only have the talent to be a Phoenix player at the moment. They're specifically trying to get guys who tick a number of boxes, whereas the Breakers, it's just like, let's get the absolute peak dude and we'll figure everything else out later on. Which, to be fair, don't know that we've seen the evidence of that really happening over the last couple of seasons with the Breakers, but that is the strategy. And looking at the fact that they've signed like 1 billion ball handling guards for this season, so many that they actually had to let Corey Webster go, which is, I mean, I can understand from a sort of, he's the oldest one of those dudes in that little log jam, and he's someone who has, experience playing overseas a fair bit, and obviously wanted to go experience playing in Egypt. So like the off the court stuff made sense why it would be him. But on the court, he's also probably the best of, you look at like McDowell White and Ty Webster and etc. Some of the young dudes that they've got around, and Peyton Seaver as well, and as their import. And you look at some, like all those dudes that were in that same situation, and arguably Corey Webster is the best one of those at playing off the ball and just like catching and shooting and nailing down threes and stuff. So that's maybe not the guy who on the court you would have picked to be the one who had to give way. But then again, it's exactly the same thing. It's like the Breakers' strategy is, let's just get the guys and we'll figure it out down the road. Like, we'll make it work somehow. Whereas the Breakers, as I'm saying, like the Phoenix are all about, we're not going to figure this out later. Like, we're going to get the guys right now and like save doing all that work down the line. We're going to do the work now by just getting guys in where you don't have to do that work down the line, like guys who fit from the start. And they've been very good at it. Like, it's not just that strategy. Like, I'm not saying one strategy is, well, I do think one strategy is better than the other, but it doesn't mean that the Breakers version can't work. And it doesn't mean that the Phoenix are, because they're doing this other strategy, are automatically better at what they're doing. Like, they also have to be extremely good at scouting. They have to be able to, like, it's one thing to say you want to sign the right guys. It's another thing to like identify and actually do that. Like, there's a lot of work that goes into that just beyond the starting point of the philosophy that goes into it. There's like, think of, especially when you're scouting, like when they signed Ulysses Davia, just think about how many other players they could have signed. There's an entire world of footballers who would be, and a large portion of them would be open to coming and playing for the Wellington Phoenix if they're, getting well paid or whatever. There's the amount of like scouting video they would have had to go through, the amount of I would say CVs, just to keep it funky, but probably more like like Y Scout profiles and stuff like that they're having to go through to get to where they got to, and then to still sign a guy who could come in and be one of their best ever imports. Like, that's not just because they wanted to sign the right guy. Like, there's a lot else that goes into that, the prowess of being able to identify and bring in the right guys and convince them to come and play for you, and then to get the best out of them when they do, all of that. But yeah, there definitely some interesting areas with the contrasting ways that those two teams have been going about their recruitment, for sure.
The talent versus fit bit. How does Peyton Seaver's Samoan heritage fit into the Breakers? Like you said, the Breakers don't quite have they're going for the talent and not the fit. But it seems like Peyton Seaver's Samoan Uso-ness is a real big part of their fit. All of which I'm saying in jest. Like it's just it's part of their weird thing that like their selling point on one of their new recruits is he's Samoan, so he's going to fit into our quasi Polynesian sports club. Like it's very weird.
I don't know how many. I have to look at the roster because I don't want to be speculative. I know the Webster brothers have they have African American heritage. They also have some Maori heritage as well. So it's maybe a little bit there. Tom Abercrombie's about as white gets. Don't know about Finn Delaney, but he's from Nelson. So fill in the, I do think that is I definitely think it's more of a factor of like Peyton Seaver has Samoan heritage, therefore he's open to coming and playing for a team that's based in the Pacific,
Polynesian capital of the world. Let's be honest,
for sure. So I think that's something that works a little bit more in him deciding to come down rather than him fitting into the team. I don't know. I mean, you've got an Israeli head coach with Israeli American assistants. I don't know that really. Just like I don't know that anything else is like culturally a much of a factor. Or, I don't know, but I do like Peyton Seaver. I think he'll be a good player for them.
There's another. I think John Collins, the NBA player. I think he's the NBA Hawks. I've seen him with a
big man,
sleeve tattoo as well. So he might be next to
mine. Guy called Stephen Adams too, who's got a bit of Tongan in him. So.
Well, yeah, Stephen Adams is fucking Matua Doko, half-caste hero of Aotearoa. So that's the comparison between the two clubs. Now, specifically about the Phoenix, just updating their business, Davila is gone to MacArthur, you wrote, and then Tommy Hemed. Shout out to Israel, because we've been talking a lot. There's a heavy Israel presence in this episode right now, with Dan Shamir and Tommy Hemed discussing both in the sporting context strictly, no political.
Strictly, yeah.
Tommy Hemed is off to Western Sydney Wanderers. Kia kaha to him. So those are two pretty high-profile Phoenix players who have left the club. Where does your positivity or just good vibes sit, considering two really Davila was a bit of he wasn't there for so long at the Phoenix, but he did kind of emerge as a bit of a key player, not a bit of but a very key player, and someone who was well liked by the Phoenix Brigade. And then Hemed was just he was pretty good at banging in goals as a striker. So how do you process losing those two players with the players that they have coming in, which looks to be Mr. Hooper, Gary Hooper, I think.
That's the one.
Yep. And you've got Stephen Taylor's coming back. We always need a hearty centre back to hold things down. But Cam Devlin's gone, so he's another decent first 11 starting player who is gone, which I have Devlin, Hemed, and Davila. That is 3 first 11 players gone. And now how are the Phoenix going to plug those holes? Who are the players that you're looking at right now as players from within that they have coming up through their system, or players that they have re-signed? Because I see that the homeboy Clayton Lewis has re-signed with the club as well. And is that going to be boosted by signings from the wide world of football? You mentioned the scouting thing there, and when you were tweeting about Joe Bell possibly getting into the transfer season business that we'll chat about in a jiffy, old mate Sam Smith, who is deep in the football universe, he said that there were scouts from 3 different clubs watching Joe Bell play. And I'm just always amazed that the footballing recruitment scouting system. You mentioned how the Phoenix sussed out recruiting Davila, getting him from wherever he was to come to little old Phoenix. I think in summary, I just would like to be a football scout, just travel the world and watch football players, and just there's especially if you can find a niche where it's this guy's the best scout of New Zealand players. He's he goes and watches all the New Zealand players. So if you want to sign a player from New Zealand, check out this dude, because he's currently watching Joe Bell play. Then he's going to go take a flight and watch Elijah Just play, and then he's going to go check out Chris Wood. And he's his sole job is scouting New Zealand players. Just seems like a cool job,
Yeah, it does. Seems like an amazing job. I wonder how much of that is done watching streams and stuff these days. I don't know. I expect it probably always has been, because I think the actual going to it, at least in the old days, it used to be from reading stories or listening to podcasts about people talking with like you don't get good football podcasts with current players generally, but there's a few decent ones where they'll talk to like retired players. And I remember listening to one, I think the Man United podcast, where they were talking about must have been Ronnie Johnson. I think they like the actual going to watch the game is the last thing. Like you've got to get your references and hear about this player, and some other scout down like lower down the queue has passed the line up to you to be like once the head scout at Manchester United or whatever goes to watch Ronnie Johnson or something like that. That's because they're genuinely thinking about signing him. By the time you get that far down the path. But the story there was that they went to watch Ronnie Johnson play for like a Norway under-20s game or something like that, and this like baby-faced kid up front scored a double, and the second one was apparently an absolute screamer or whatever, and they're like, hey, what's that guy's name? The Solskjaer, apparently, so Solskjaer something or other. And so they signed Ronnie Johnson, and then they also picked up the Solskjaer fella just as a bit of a whim as well, and he's now the manager of the team. Like 25 years later or 30 years later or whatever it is. So the scouting game is definitely an exciting one. What were we saying about the optimism about the Phoenix rebuilding or playing through some of the...
Like, in summary, they've let like 3 first 11 players go.
Yeah.
How are they refreshing those stocks from within, or re-signings, or just like looking elsewhere?
Well, as I said before, I think they'll probably not probably. I think they have to sign an import player to replace Ulysses Davia. You got to find some of that like creative output from somewhere. And as much as there will be hope that this will be a breakthrough season for Reno Piscopo if he stays fit, and one or two others maybe as well, like the more the merrier. You want to be bringing in someone to do what Davia does as well, and then sort of those other guys are chipping in around him. Rather, that's generally the more talent you can have there, the better. The Tommy Hemed thing, I think, has taken care of itself, because Tommy Hemed leaves and they just bring back Gary Hooper, who had a similar goal scoring trend. He's not fitness was an issue for him in his first season. I think that was sort of, it came with the territory. Like a player of his caliber would not have been playing for the Phoenix at his age were it not for the fact that he had an injury history. Like there had to be a catch, you know what I mean? There had to be an asterisk on that. A dude who used to score goals in the Champions League for Celtic, what's he doing at the Phoenix? Well, injuries have busted him for the last couple of years. So expecting a full season out of him there was a risk, but you hope at least he would have been fit for their elimination final game, which they lost 1-0 to Perth and dominated and couldn't score. But that's the way it goes. Hooper was injured, their top goal scorer. Well, there you go. Hopefully he will be. He's had a season in India, I think. There's a weird connection going on between India and the A-League where players seem to be going back and forth. In particular, Phoenix players, because that's actually where they scouted Davia from. It's where Roy Krishna went. Guys like, I think, Mandy and Matty Steinman, former defensive midfielders, both went over there as well. Gary Hooper, Stephen Taylor went there for his like sort of 6 to 9 months sojourn. Don't know what's going on there, but that's how that worked. Gary Hooper's back, so hopefully he will be fitter than he was previously, able to play a lot of games. And if he plays a lot of games, he will score a lot of goals. Like, he will do that. That will take care of itself. And, maybe a little bit more prominence for someone like David Ball, who potentially got squeezed out a little bit, just trying to find a place for him in the formation. I know they wanted to try sign Tommy Hemed even after they had brought back Hooper. They were hoping to have just chuck them both up there, and then you're covered. If one gets injured, you still got the other one. So maybe they do have a couple import spots. I don't know if they will try to sign another target man striker to go with Hooper, or if they will. There was talk about maybe signing a centre back to pair with Taylor, and then being able to play Tim Payne at right back. Then I don't know. Arguably, they might want a midfielder to replace what Cam Devlin does. There's still a lot of, as I say, there's a couple import spots. There's 2 or 3 or 4 local spots as well left on the roster. They need to sign at least 4 more players. Can sign as many as 7. So there's recruitment to be done, and based on the last couple years of recruitment and the strike rate, the success rate that they've had of signing players who can contribute and do good things for them, I'm fairly confident they'll find, they're not going to find another Ulysses Devere, but they might find someone who in their own way can have a similar creative output. So I'm confident enough in that that they will get close enough to where they want to be to be as competitive as they've hoped to be for the last couple of years. Repeat that dose. There's the recruitment. You never know. Like, it's always a little bit of a gamble. Bringing in players just bringing in any players into a unit, but like the recent history suggests they're pretty good at this. So I'd back them for now.
What about because you write here in your latest Wellington Phoenix recruitment yarn how they've done a great job of identifying players from New Zealand who are through circumstance have come back to New Zealand. Clayton Lewis, you mentioned Tim Payne as well, and guys like Tiatafai Hudson Wihongi. What about it's kind of a two-part thing. Is there players who aren't in the Wellington Phoenix system right now in Aotearoa who you think would be good matches, not like speculating the Phoenix should sign them, but are just like good matches in alignment with what the Phoenix under Ufuk Talai have done pretty good job of? And or are there really high ceiling prospects coming up through the Phoenix pipeline? You mentioned here Ben Wayne and Sam Sutton. I imagine those are two of the high ceiling prospects coming through. Is it do you see the Phoenix balancing those two things of trying to find another Clayton Lewis or Tim Payne from within the New Zealand football scene? Or are they more about bringing players through their blossoming Wellington Phoenix kind of pipeline that is blossoming now under Ufuk Talai? Is it a bit of both? Is it more one or the other? And if it is a bit of both, who are some lads in the New Zealand domestic scene that you think might be good matches for the Phoenix?
Yeah, I think the academy's been blossoming going back before Talai. In fact, I'd say I don't know, that they've always been able to get one or two players squeezing through, like Alex Rufer and Louis Fenton. Fenton might actually predate the academy in its current sort of form, but he hasn't played for another professional club. He came up through the ranks there. There've always been a few players that would work their way up. Remember, like Marco Rojas getting on that little scholarship thing that they did for him. You could chuck someone like Costa Barbarossa's in there potentially. Tyler Boyd and Joe Bell, two of the sort of a little bit more recently, two of the premier players to have come out of there. But a lot of these guys didn't stick around, right? The difference now is that guys like Kikache came through, had 2 or 3 good seasons with the first team before leaving. Sarpreet Singh had about a year and a half in the first team. Ben Wayne had knocked back interest from, I think it was Coventry City in the English Championship to remain at the Phoenix, thinking that he would get more first team football here and be in a better position to get a transfer elsewhere down the line. Like, when you bring in 3 young players at the Phoenix, they're going to have ambition. They're going to be hoping to go, and it's not just the Kiwi guys from the academy either. Like Cam Devlin's a good example of someone who hadn't had a lot of opportunities elsewhere. Played about 7 games, I think, for Sydney. Follows like Ufuk Talai over, who had been his assistant coach there, and then becomes one of the best defensive midfielders in the entire A-League in the couple of years that he was there with the Phoenix. And now he's playing for, just completed a transfer to Hearts in the Scottish Premiership. So that's like that's a big deal move. He went to Newcastle Jets for a couple of weeks in between, which is a weird one. Like they get a transfer fee for him, but he never, because he was I don't think he would have even turned up to a preseason training with them. I think he was signed with them for about a month, but I don't think he ever actually did anything official for the team. I might be wrong there, but who knows? I'm just thinking, considering the Olympics and then the little quarantine period afterwards and whatever, and the Phoenix should get a couple dollars passed down the chain. There might be a little bit left over for them because they had him on the books for a couple of years beforehand. Technically, that's how it's supposed to work with FIFA. I don't know that it all that often does. I'm not really sure how that goes. There's as to like local players who could step up and do some of that. I mean, Jack Henry Sinclair springs to mind because not only is he one of the best players in the domestic scene, but he's a very good attacking right back, and that's exactly what the Phoenix seem to need. And I mean, unless they do want to put Tim Payne back to right back and sign a star centre back or something like that. But I mean, I deliberately avoided naming names in the article because I didn't want to like just be speculative about things. But yeah, like there's definitely, you look at the guys who were playing for Team Wellington or Auckland City last season, in that in the semi-finals and final of the last the very last premiership of its incarnation. Like there's several players who I think could make a step up there. It is a little bit of a gamble. Like you do not only have to, as we were saying before, like the fits aspect. You don't only need to be good enough, and when you're playing at a lower level, it's going to be a bit of guesswork there as well, because you're not just saying this guy's the best player at this level. You're also saying this guy might be one of the best players at this level, but can he step up to, like, can he maintain those kind of performances at a higher level? And that's not always the case. So there's a little bit of a gamble involved, and it's probably difficult to get guys in on trial at the moment when Auckland's going to be in lockdown for a couple of weeks. I don't know how that will go. This might just be a season where it's a little bit trickier to find another Clayton Lewis or Tim Payne, but like for sure there are guys around who like, I mean, those two are good examples of people who have been in a situation where they were like two of the better players in the domestic stuff in New Zealand, given an opportunity to play for the Phoenix, and have been excellent for them in the like since then, like fully rewarded that trust and faith and them being given those opportunities. So the fact that those two exist suggests that there are going to be more. Like, what are the chances you pick the only two guys that can do that? It's just a matter of are there players in the right positions that the squad is looking to sign? Are there players who are going to be interested in like having to sit on the bench maybe for the first season and work their way in? Maybe not even on the bench, like maybe having to work their way just onto the bench in the first place. Like there's quite a bit that would go into that, but for sure there are dudes who can do that. It's just, yeah, so long as everything aligns, and they'd be open enough to it, because it's like, as I say, they've had a couple of success stories like that already.
Well, give us a name or two. Like, who just stands out? If I say the Phoenix are recruiting a player from the domestic New Zealand scene, who are they recruiting?
Well, as I say, Jack Henry Sinclair would be up there. I don't know if they'd go back to the Hamish Watson well, but I'll definitely enjoy that. I don't know. He deserves, on the one hand, he deserves more TV time in the A-League. On the other hand, he's a superhero of the New Zealand's domestic circuit. So it's like you graduate from that, you're no longer a superhero. You're not going to be a superhero of the A-League doing what he does. So it's a catch-22. You want the greater exposure, but also you want to hold on to your superhero status. Yeah, for sure. He's a premiership king, and whatever format the premiership, as long as he's there, I assume he will be. He's played a few games for he's at Olympic. I think he's at Wellington Olympic this year. Like, I've tuned out a little bit on that in recent times, so I'm forgetful. But like, I mean, I think Adam Mitchell is an excellent centre back who could definitely do a backup role for the Phoenix. And there's a couple others in his category, like a Tyler Shrivers. I mean, Justin Gully had a little brief stint when Mark Rudin was there. There's heaps, like, especially also if you want to get into like goalkeepers, when you consider that Stefan Marinovic has left and they need to sign another goalkeeper to their roster to have you have to have two goalkeepers signed up on pro contracts. At the moment, it might be Alex Paulson. Like, the keeper from the reserve team who was initially a traveling reserve at the Olympics. Then they got rid of the traveling reserves and just let them be full squad members. So he was at, an Olympian there. He's still a little bit raw. I think it'd be rough to chuck him in. He's still a teenager to chuck him in too early, but maybe he will be the bench goalie behind Ollie Sale this season. I don't know. At the moment, he would have to be because he's the only other goalkeeper around. Ben Old, also from the academy, was in the same situation going to the Olympics. He's got his debut late last season. I would hope to see a little bit more of him as well. He's a very skillful, tricky midfielder. It's good, just the kind of player that New Zealand doesn't often develop. I don't know how, it'll be interesting to see when you actually get a look at him a bit more in the A-League and see how that follows. Because I thought last season in the Premiership, he made huge strides. He was obviously already a very skillful player who could beat a defender and whatever, but he made huge strides, I thought, physically, where he was able to hold off defenders and just drop in, collect the ball. Defender gets on him, he's able to hold them off for that sort of first contact, and then at that point he's just let the feet do the work and spin around, and suddenly you're on attack. A lot of that kind of thing from him. So how that tracks if you go even higher up there's one thing to do that at the Premiership level where you're going to have some big rough guys defending against you, but maybe they're not going to be as quick or as skillful or whatever. They're definitely not going to be full package defenders on the most part. Maybe a couple of exceptions, I don't know, but A-League, it's you're gonna get your shin pads cracked a few times trying to do that kind of thing. So I see how that goes. He's definitely the top outfield prospect at the in the academy at the moment. Has already, as I say, made his debut. But yeah, there's talent from all different areas. There's just a matter of who fits. And I could run through another dozen names of Premiership players from last season, but it's not just them as well. There's a few guys who are playing in state league football in Australia, which is also a decent little pocket of prospects there as well. So many different options. It's all about just finding the ones that are going to do what the coach wants, I suppose.
But coming full circle, it does also seem like the Phoenix have a lot of their needs are met with their in-house academy development system, which does seem to be a lot more efficient and effective than what the Breakers are doing. Whether that's players in the Phoenix squad right now who are young players, as you said, have already made their debut, but a lot of the other names that I hear a lot with the Phoenix are within their club, are within their pipeline, and are really talented players matching in alignment with the golden generation of football that we have. Just to wrap up here.
The Breakers don't get the luxury of having an academy team in a national league that they can compete in. I don't know if there's been talks of getting a team in the NBL or something like that, but I also don't know if they'd be that interested in doing something like that. It's not something that's it's not something they have the luxury of just this big group of players that are just sitting below the surface to be called upon. But they did have a couple of development players last season, and it was nice to see them go back to signing good Kiwi prospects in those. Isaac Davidson was there. Tane Murray was there as well, but I think combined they played about 30 minutes last season for a team that went 12-24, a team that lost twice as many games as they won, and they could only find about 30 minutes for their development players. So yeah, compare that to let people fill in the rest of the join the rest of the dots there, but compare those two situations. It's stark.
So we do want to do a bit of a segment on the Flying Kiwis transfers and player movements. We have, according to you, Joe Bell is staying at Viking, and Liberto Kakache is staying wherever he is. You didn't have that club in your speech.
Croydon, yeah.
Yep. And Ryan Thomas is staying with PSV. Those, we've heard a lot of news, and you get a lot of the transfer buzz around players, obviously around the football world, especially when it's deadline day and all that stuff. But From a Kiwi perspective, Kakache did appear to have the most buzz, the most hype. We always get a lot of mentions about, oh, this team is scouting Kakache, or this team has made an inquiry. Those are the headlines we get back. Those are the headlines that filter their way back to like New Zealand, and whether it's yourself or some of the other media outlets. There was a bit of buzz around Joe Bell, just what he's doing with Viking, and the talent that he's displayed, obviously with the Olympics as well. Ryan Thomas, I don't know why he'd want to leave PSV. Like, that just seems like a solid option, solid club. One of the biggest clubs in Netherlands, I imagine, still right now. So just we'll get into the players who have made a move, have had a transfer, a loan deal, whatever, and you can kind of wrap all that up. But just quickly, why is it good? No, let's stick with, is it good or is it bad for Joe Bell, Kakache, and Ryan Thomas to be staying where they are? Like, do you see it as beneficial or a hindrance to them moving forward to stick with their respective clubs right now?
Yeah, for Ryan Thomas, it would have been a loan deal, and it would have been purely about getting him some game time, because he's not really a starter at PSV. He plays off the bench more often than he doesn't. So, I mean, it's not like he's on the outer. It's not like he's been squeezed out or anything. And I think the coach does quite like him as a backup option who can play a bunch of different positions, and he can sort of trust him to do a job. Every coach likes to have that kind of like player who's just, you know, if I'm desperate, this guy can play there. It'll be fine. And I know he'll give us 7 out of 10 like level of performance, even though it's an unfamiliar position or whatever. Like, I don't think that was such an issue, but yeah, it's fit in PSV. I think he can deal with that. It's just whether he could get good game time and whether the club wanted him to get good game time. I think it sounds like it was a little bit more about other clubs looking and saying, well, he's not playing that much, and he's been quite good when he's played for other teams, including like Pek Zwolle were one of the teams supposedly who were interested. Them and Fortuna Sittard. I think it was more about those clubs approaching PSV and being like, so is this guy available? Cheeky loan deal. What do you reckon? We'll get him back on his feet. And that just was, I think PSV might have entertained it under the right circumstances. I don't know what Tomo would have thought about it. But ultimately it was knocked back. So that, you know, knocked back by PSV was what it sounded like happened. They didn't come at them with the right, I don't know, loan fees or whatever, or how much of his salary is he going to cover? Well, if it's not good on our end, it's no deal. So that didn't happen. And that's fine. Like, I think he's still, as you say, in a very good position, and I'm fine with him coming off the bench for PSV. I think it's an all right place to be. Kakache, like, there has been rumors, not a lot in recent times. It's a little bit surprised there wasn't more, because we have heard like a Juventus interest, and at times there was like a couple teams in Spain who were keeping an eye out, but nothing since the Olympics, which was a little bit surprising for me. But I don't necessarily think this was the year he would have been sold anyway. I think you get a guy like that, you want a couple years, and then maybe you look, because that's definitely a club that would be thinking about selling him. Like, there's a dude, Tomiyasu, Takeda Tomiyasu, something like that. He's a Japanese international, played against the Ollie Whites and the Olympics there. He used to play for STVV, and he was like signed for a similar fee as what Kakache signed for. They sold him to Bologna in Italy. A couple years later, he's one of the better defenders in Italy, and he's just signed with Arsenal for like £28 million or something. So there's a trajectory. There's a nice little blueprint for what Kakache might be trying to do, but he probably needs another year to steady himself in the Belgian league first. So I didn't necessarily expect any movement in the short term with him. With Joe Bell, he was very close. My impression from what has been reported is that Barnsley just didn't stump up enough cash. They didn't give a high enough offer for Viking to be like, well, he's got 18 months left on his contract. Why would we sell him now when we're halfway through a season where we're actually coming into some good form? He's playing really well. We think we've got a really strong team that can compete for European places for next season. Why would we weaken ourselves for a subpar offer at this point? I wonder if in January we might see a bit more of that coming back around, where because the Norwegian season is on a different schedule to the different calendar to the like English and German and a few of those other leagues that were supposedly rumored with him, clubs from those leagues rumored with him, where like the January transfer window will be the end of normal season. So I wonder maybe, and that'll be also the clock starts ticking because he'll be into the last 12 months of his contract at that point. I wonder maybe if that's when we start to get a little bit more like the interest has been very much established at this point. I wonder if that's when things get like serious of, well, we're not only are other clubs going to be like, okay, well, we've had an extra few months, like an extra 4 months from this point to watch him. He's continued to play very well, as we hope he will do. Now is when we start moving, and maybe that is also when Vikings start listening to offers a little bit more seriously too. I don't know. There's one other name I'd chuck on there as well for someone who didn't move, and that's Winston Reed. Winston Reed obviously is being squeezed out at West Ham for a couple of years due to all his injuries. They've just signed Kurt Zuma from Chelsea, so that's one more expensive centre-back in front of him in the pecking order, which destroys a little bit of the outside hope I had that maybe because they're in the Europa League with like double game weeks and stuff and how difficult that can be, more squad rotation, maybe that would help him ease back into things. Don't really think that's the fact that they've spent big money on a new centre back probably douses those flames. But as to why he's still at West Ham, well, that's because he's injured from the Olympics. So, haven't heard an update for a week or two, but definitely they said about when the Premier League first started, they said he was still rehabbing the injury from the Olympics, wasn't back in full training. I think at that point, when you're a injury-prone defender, no other team is going to be like, okay, we'll take you on loan for 6 months without like waiting for him to get the all clear fitness-wise first. That might still happen, but I think because the loan window you can still loan within the same country, I think. And I think a championship loan like he did last year was always the most likely thing. But maybe might have to wait to January just because of the injuries. So he might just be stuck at West Ham not playing games for a couple months. It seems probably what's going to happen. But you never know. Maybe he'll get a League Cup appearance or something like that. It's been about three and a half years or something since he last played for West Ham. So it would be nice. The fans do like him because he was he's a fan favorite while he was playing. It was very good for multiple seasons there for them. It would be nice if he got at least one more appearance. He's actually close to a testimonial game as well. He's been there nearly 10 years. So maybe there'll be a fairy tale farewell. Who knows?
One last thing. Who is Dalton Wilkins?
Dalton Wilkins, left back for Eastern Suburbs when they won the Premiership in the Ole Academy Declan Edge Danny Hay season. I like Dalton Wilkins. I think he's a really good defender. He went over to Helsingør at the same time as Eli Just, and Callum McCowart hung back and played a season for the Phoenix. Then McCowart goes and joins them a year later. And this is last season. So last season, they would have had all three of the dudes there at the same time. Well, they did. But Dalton Wilkins picked up a serious injury in game one of the season before McCowart had actually got into things yet. So he made his comeback in the final game of last season. So he played the first game and the last game and nothing in between because of injury. And he's been sort of building his way back up from that in this current start of this current season, and he's just been loaned out to Kolding IF in the third tier, so one division below, just purely like up until the end of the year, so not for the full season, just until the start of January, purely about getting minutes, just like getting him back on his feet, because he's not first 11 at the moment because of his injuries, and it's just all about playing some footy. But of course they have to have, I don't know if it's a rule or what, but Helsingør seem to think they have to have 3 Kiwis at any time. So with Wilkins going out on loan, they brought in Nando Peinecker on loan, who was also part of that Eastern Suburbs. I'm curious to look up that. I might do this after we finish, actually. I'll look up what the starting 11 was in that grand final and see like where everybody is now, because I think there's probably... Calvin Carloa might have started that game, and he would be the only player still playing domestically in New Zealand, I think. I'd have to have a look, and I'd have to, as I said, I'd have to have a look. But that wave of Ole Academy players was pretty special, and you knew they were pretty special when they won the, when they were all like I mean, they weren't the only guys in that team. Guys like Tim Payne was in that team as well. And they had some very good senior players, but like you've a team whose creative output was built on a bunch of like 18, 19-year-olds, and they won the Kiwi Premiership is a pretty good example. And we just see like these guys are going on to bigger and better things since, and continual progression in this direction.
Sure. We'll wrap it up there. We'll be back early next week with another episode of the Variety Show, almost daily Black Caps, White Ferns cricket podcast on Patreon, and always broadcasting Kiwi sporting excellence at the Niche Cache. Kia kaha, stay beautiful. Cheers.